This podcast contains explicit content and discussions related to real life criminal activities, including violence and sensitive topics. Listener discretion is advised. The host's opinions are personal and are not representative of any individuals or organizations involved in the cases. Please strive for accuracy, but if you've missed anything, please let us know. Thank you for listening. Welcome to Rotten Minds. I'm Kay.
And I'm V.
What goes through the mind of a father for him to end up killing his whole family and lie about it? What are the events that led him to consider this as his only option? Nicole Atkinson had a commitment that morning. She had agreed to drive her pregnant best friend Shanann Watts to the hospital in town for a scheduled checkup. But Shanann was not picking up any calls or replying to any texts, and that is when Nicole decided to drop by and check up on her with her son. As she got to Shanann's house, she noticed something. Shanann's shoes were still at the front door. Her car was in the garage, and Nicole knocked on the door but got no answer. Shanann's house had the security ring camera system in their home that sent an alert to their phones when someone is in close proximity to their house. She called Shanann's husband, Chris Watts, asking if he knew where Shanann was. He told Nicole that he was away from the house and that Shanann had gone on a playdate. But when Nicole peered into the garage, she saw that Shanann's car, aka the family's only car, was still sitting in the garage, with two kids' car seats still in it. Along with Shanann, the daughters Bella and Celeste, aged 4 and 3, were nowhere to be found either. Nicole tried the front door and noticed it was locked from inside, meaning that no one had left through the front door that morning. This again sent an alert to Chris's phone, and he told Nicole again that Shanann had gone on a playdate and basically to stay away from the house. When she said that she felt that something was not right, and that she was going to call the cops, he said, "Don't call the cops, don't get them involved." And this is when Nicole decided to call 911 to do a welfare check on Shanann. Given Shanann was also 15 weeks pregnant and had 2 small kids in the house and was unresponsive to texts and calls.
When Frederick PD showed up at Shanann's house, they found Nicole outside. She gave them a quick rundown of the situation. The police then called Chris Watts, Shanann's husband, asking him if he knew where his pregnant wife was. They asked him for the garage passcode, but he told them the passcode didn't work. He was not at home and told them to wait until he got to the house, which is super weird in the first place.
I mean, if I was in his place, and I think majority of normal people, right? This was also said by the agents, or the people who were involved in this case directly, right? It was told, this was a remark that they also shared, that if it were for them, right? It's such a weird thing to tell the police to wait till he got there, because it would be like, break down my door, try to see what's happening with the kids,
He was really defensive.
The fact that he kept saying that Shanann was on a play date when they only have one car.
Yeah.
And playdate means taking the kids as well, right?
Yeah.
And both of their car seats were still inside the car. And Nicole could see it.
Nicole was a very close friend of theirs.
The fact that the real heroes will see as it goes, but then Nicole really is she was really persistent, right?
Yeah.
She could have just left, but it's her concern.
She
and
knew
care.
her friend, that's the thing. I actually watched the body cam footage of this case, and the way Chris behaves is very, very weird from the get-go. Instead of calling out his wife or kids' names, and before the authorities could, he went into the garage and checked out Shanann's car, which was still there. Mind you, for a few seconds, it is just Chris near the car with the door open with him reaching in. Only Chris knew if he took something out of it that day. He then snuck into the house through the internal garage door and opened the front door from the inside. There is a time gap of 1 minute and 7 seconds before he lets his neighbors and police officers into the house. After that, the police search the house and find nothing out of the ordinary. except that all of Shanann's belongings were still in the house and the bed sheets were missing from the master bedroom and the children's bedroom. Nicole was also able to locate Shanann's phone wedged in between the couch. When I watched the body cam footage, it shows Chris fidgeting with his phone, and when asked a question by the police, he answers them without looking them in the eye, still glued to his phone, and it looked like he was texting someone. Most times in emergency situations like these, people call as many people as they can as quickly as possible to get any intel possible to locate their missing loved ones. But in this case, Chris's behavior was just odd and not going unnoticed. This might also be Chris's introverted way of avoiding eye contact. Chris tells officers that they were recently having problems in their marriage and that Shanann probably just took off with the kids.
Well, if you watch the body cam footage, you can see that Chris does a lot of gestures. He's awkward and has weird responses, and is quite restless. And since the officers haven't known Chris before this, most of his actions basically would seem like he was just in shock, like he was having an emotional stress response when that someone usually has when their loved ones are missing. But his neighbor, who had known Chris on a much personal level even before this incident, had more of an idea of his normal baseline behavior. When Chris stepped away, his neighbor told officers that something was off with Chris and that he usually wasn't this talkative or fidgety. He said that Chris is an introvert and silent and usually doesn't say much, but at that moment he just couldn't seem to stop talking. He also mentioned that recently they had heard a lot of yelling and screaming coming from the Watts house, and that Chris gets crazy in those yellings. The neighbor calls Chris normally quiet and subdued, but on that particular day he kept repeating himself, talking more than he normally does, and that he seemed like he was trying to cover his tracks. Well, actually, this is very useful because a person's normal baseline behavior and how they act when they're trying to lie is quite different, unless they're like a psychopath. Like, I don't know if Chris is a psychopath, like I don't know if he's been given a test or something, but it's quite easier for people who already know you to find out if you're acting weirdly. So,
and especially, in most cases, neighbors or close friends kind of give a description of what that person is actually like. And that kind of just contributes to helping the case, kind of, right?
But then the way that this neighbor, when I was watching the body cam footage, right? The way the neighbor was so sure, the way that he tells the police don't ask him, the neighbor himself. He says, something's not right, he's not normally like this. He can feel it in his bones, kind of, there's something off about him right now. The neighbor also had a crucial piece of evidence aiding their suspicions about Chris. His security cameras had surveillance footage of Chris alone leaving the house that day early morning after loading multiple unidentified items into his truck. This was his work truck and he had backed the truck all the way into the driveway, and so we can't exactly see what he is loading into the truck. He made multiple trips that morning. Let that sink in. The next day, Chris, for whatever reason, agreed to appear on 2 different news networks to get out the story of his missing family. The whole thing was super weird. It was almost as if he was stuck in between laughing and smiling. Just had this weird grin on his face. The body language was off, especially for someone who was supposed to be freaking out about his missing pregnant wife and his infant children. He kept saying, please come back. I hope she's safe somewhere. I hope somebody sees something or somebody knows something and comes forward. Listen to this guy display his poor acting skills on TV.
Do you think she just took off? Do you think?
I mean, right now I don't even want to just throw anything out there. I hope that she's somewhere safe right now and with the kids. But I mean, could she just taken off? I don't know. But if somebody has her and they're not safe, I want them back now. That's what's in my head. If they're safe right now, they're gonna come back. But if they're not safe right now, that's the not knowing part. If they're not safe, last night I had every light in the house on. I was hoping that I would just ran over by the kids running in the door and just barrel rushing me, but it didn't happen. And it was just a traumatic night trying to be here.
I'm gonna ask some kind of tough questions. Your relationship with your kids.
Yeah, my kids are my life. I mean, those smiles light up my life. And just like, I mean, last night, like during when they usually eat dinner, it was just like I missed them. Like, I mean, I missed telling them, hey, you got to eat that, or you're not gonna get your dessert, and just like you're not gonna get your snack after. I missed that. Like I missed them, cuddle up on their couches. They have like a Minnie Mouse couch and a Sophia couch that they cuddle up on and watch, Bubble Guppies or something. And it was just like, I was. It was tearing me apart last night, and I needed that. I needed that last night, and for nobody to be here last night and to go into their rooms and know that I wasn't going to turn the rain machines on, and I know that I wasn't going to turn their monitor on, and know I wasn't going to kiss them to bed tonight. It was. That's why last night was just horrible. I couldn't do it. I want everybody to just come home. Like wherever they're at, come home. That's what I want.
This might be a tough question, but did you guys get into an argument before she left?
It wasn't like an argument. We had an emotional conversation, but I'll leave it at that. But I just want them back. I just want them to come back. And if they're not safe right now, that's what's tearing me apart. Because if they are safe, they're coming back. But if they're not, this has got to stop. Like somebody has to come forward.
My last question, if you have any though, so feel free to step in. My last question is, if your wife can see this, if she can watch these, what would you like to tell your wife and your kids?
Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. Like if somebody has her, just please bring her back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here. Please bring her back.
That's it. I can take that mic off you.
It's just mind-blowing to me. So nonchalant. He also says he called her 3 times and got no response. Man, if I were calling up somebody and I felt that something was off, I would call him 300 times probably, not 3. 4 hours later, he was called in for questioning. From the get-go in the interrogation footage, you can see that the detective is not taking his word for anything. He talks about having issues with their marriage, talking to Shanann about putting up their house for sale, and that having another baby right now is probably not the best choice for them. He says that this is something that he would never do to his kids or his wife at all. The officer gives him the silent treatment and he just keeps talking, as if to make himself more believable.
When the detective asks why he should believe him, he describes himself in great detail as some sort of pacifist and a person who hates violence. The detective then comes back with a family photo of the Watts, and Chris, with no persuasion, starts describing each of them in a few lines by first stating their names. When describing Bella, he said she was a girly girl.
He slipped up, right? That's right. That's a slip up right there.
Yeah.
Talking about her in past tense.
Yeah. That is like kind of like a very obvious thing.
But then when you're trying to get the story straight in your head, you kind of lose track of what you're saying sometimes. And I think that's how he just slipped up there.
Yeah,
and this happens in multiple cases. Like some people, without actually thinking, they refer to the person they've harmed in past tense.
Yeah. Shanann worked in an MLM kind of job and she was really good at it. So good that she got awarded a company car, a Lexus, and that was the only car the family had. Chris, on the other hand, worked for a company named Anadarko Petroleum. Shanann was quite active on social media, mainly on Facebook Lives, since her job required her to do so. And I guess it sort of became natural for her to post videos, photos, and go on lives showing her personal life as well. Chris has also appeared in her lives before, mainly in one in which she surprised him with the happy news of being pregnant with their 3rd child, with Chris's reaction being captured live, which can only be called weird. He didn't look pleased with the news at all. Shanann was not camera shy and seemed comfortable sharing her life online. Meanwhile, Chris came off as more introverted. In the police interrogation video footage, Chris keeps saying that he has never cheated on his wife, but he suspected her of cheating, but hope she hasn't. And what do you think? Chris indeed had been cheating on his wife with a woman also named Nicole Kessinger. This Nicole was different from Shanann's friend Nicole Atkinson. Nicole Kessinger is a whole character on her own, mainly described by her Google search history. We'll shortly get into that. Let's call her Kessinger to avoid confusion. Kessinger met Chris at work at Anadarko Petroleum and denied ever having known he was married because he didn't wear a ring, which for most people working in an industry like theirs would be a safety hazard. Chris eventually mentioned his wife and children, but Kessinger claimed that he and Shanann were separated. However, computer records show that Kessinger frequented Shanann's Facebook page quite a lot and was up to date about Shanann being pregnant, and it was quite evident that it did not seem like she was going through a divorce. She had a series of strange Google searches like marrying your mistress and man I'm having an affair with says he will leave his wife. Police also found evidence that Kessinger Googled Chris Watts months before she quote-unquote actually met him at work.
I mean, this is all clear evidence that she for sure knew that Chris had a family back home and was not unmarried as she claimed she believed he was. Neighbors also report seeing a vehicle similar to the one Kessinger owned near the Watts family home on the day of the murders. Her cell phone pinged a tower near the Watts home when she in fact lived 25 minutes away. There's also evidence that Kessinger tried to destroy her SIM card and other crucial evidence before turning in her phone to the police. As dumb as it can get, she even Googles if the cops would be able to read her deleted messages. It is a wonder that she did not get charged with destroying evidence or at least trying to do so. Phone records show that Nicole Kessinger and Chris Watts were in close contact the night before, the morning of, and the day after the murders. Text from Kessinger to Chris says, "I want to be a part of it. Being in your life is something I crave." But did she actually become a partner in crime is the real question. Chris said that he tried to subdue Shanann with OxyContin, but you need to be prescribed OxyContin, and Chris was not. But can you guess who was and where did Chris get it from? I'm quite sure that both of them knew the best place to get rid of their guilt would be the place they could hide it the best. Know where I'm going with this? Chris Lee Watts cold-bloodedly strangled his pregnant wife, killing his unborn son Nico, and smothered his two daughters, 3-year-old Celeste and 4-year-old Bella, to death. He then wrapped up their bodies in their bed sheets and buried Shanann in a shallow grave, and he shoved down both of his infant daughters into 2 separate oil tanks at his previous workplace at Anadarko Petroleum. But why? Why did he have to kill 4 people so cruelly?
He said in his interrogation that Shanann and he were falling out of love. Well, maybe because he was in love with another while his pregnant wife was left alone to deal with everything. Kessinger, on the other hand, was busy Googling Amber Frey's net worth. Amber Frey was the mistress of Scott Peterson, who was convicted of murdering his pregnant wife, Lacey Peterson. Absolute piece of crap. Killing his family to reset and get a new one. A father is who protects his kids, his family, and values them more than his own life. But clearly, that wasn't the case for Chris. While Chris was being investigated, Colorado Bureau of Investigation detectives were looking around Chris's place of work, an oil well called Survey 319. And that is when, through aerial investigation, they saw a white sheet and an area where the ground looked like it had been recently disturbed. When pushed to his wits' end, he asked for his father, Ronnie Watts, and when he asked Chris if he had anything to do with their murders, Chris confesses to his father on tape that he had killed Shanann because Shanann killed his 2 daughters by strangling them, and that, in a fit of rage, he strangled her to death. This was him shifting the blame from himself as much as he could and onto a person who could no longer defend themselves. When given an aerial photograph, he marked the area where he had buried Shanann with an S and the 2 oil wells where he dunked his tiny kids with a B and a C.
My daddy is a hero. He helps me grow up strong. He helped me snuggle too. He reads me books. He ties my shoes. If you're a hero, blue and blue, my daddy is love you.
Chris was then arrested and taken away to Well County Jail, while the investigators wasted no time in getting the family reunited again. At around 11 p.m. that night, they started excavating the area that Chris marked on map, not exactly trusting his word, and found Shanann in a shallow grave, almost discarded like trash and then covered with dirt. Recovering the kids' bodies were proving to be more difficult, and this had to be done on the next day. It was difficult to figure out if Chris was lying or not because when they opened the hatch of the oil tanks, they couldn't see anything until something on the side of the inlet caught their eye. It was a tuft of hair. The first tank had Cece or Celeste in it. She was still in her nightgown. She had just gone to bed. And the second tank had 4-year-old Bella. How could a father do something so monstrous to his own kids and pregnant wife? When I heard Cece singing about her dad being a hero, I have to admit that I cried. Poor little girl. She did what every child should be able to do, that is, trust their father with their life. Agent Kirby Lewis, who had been in service for over 30 years at the time, had either investigated or been a part of investigations over 170 homicides then, said he usually doesn't get emotional at all that often because he was able to emotionally detach himself to a certain degree, but he was not able to detach himself from this case. The pathologist concluded that Shanann Watts had died from asphyxiation due to manual strangulation. 4-year-old Bella had the most extensive injuries, and it looked like she fought back while her father snuffed the life out of her. Though Chris said that he saw Shanann strangling Cece, the pathologist determined that Celeste and Bella's cause of death was asphyxiation due to manual smothering. And this proved that Shanann did not indeed kill the kids, but Chris Watts was solely responsible for murdering his whole family. Under Colorado law, killing an unborn baby cannot be considered as murder, so they charged Chris with a charge of wrongful termination of pregnancy. Chris Watts pleaded guilty to all 9 charges, including first-degree murder as to Shanann Watts, first-degree murder as to Bella Watts, first-degree murder as to Celeste Watts, unlawful termination of pregnancy as to Nico Watts. The deal was that he would not be subjected to death penalty if he had pleaded guilty to all the charges. Sandra Rissick, Shanann's mom, said that he made the choice to take those lives, and I do not want to be in a position of making the choice to take his.
Ultimately, Chris was sentenced to 3 life sentences plus 84 years in prison with no possibility of parole. On December 3rd, 2018, Chris Watts was moved from Colorado to a correctional facility in Waupun, Wisconsin for security reasons. The story doesn't end there. Detectives flew out to Wisconsin from Colorado to meet Chris to get the full account of what exactly happened one last time. What they heard is worse than anyone could have imagined. Here's how everything unfolded on that day according to Chris. He got into an argument with Shanann, and when Shanann said he'd never see the kids ever again, he got on top of her on their daughter's bed and strangled her. Bella walked in and saw what was happening, and she said something along the lines of, "Is mommy okay?" Chris then, for whatever unforgivable reason, decided that it was not over until he got rid of his 2 girls as well. He put Shanann in the trunk of his work truck, covered up in a bedsheet, and put the girls in the back seat. He was considerate enough to not want the kids to see their dead mother's face, so he covered Shanann's head and feet with garbage bags. The girls asked if their mother was okay, to which Chris said she was fine. He then drove 45 minutes to a work site. That's 45 minutes to go back on his deranged decision and time to spare his kid's life at the very least. When they reached the oil well location, he first buried Shanann, then took out Celeste, who was sleeping in the backseat with both the girls holding onto each other. While Bella watched, he placed his big hand over Celeste's nose and mouth and smothered her to death, then shoved her tiny body into the inlet of one of the oil tanks. Keep in mind, Bella was watching all of this. When he came back for her, she fought back saying, "Daddy, no! Daddy, no!" And then, like the monster that he was, took away her life like he did to her sister. Chris told the investigator that when he closes his eyes, he is reminded of Bella pleading for her life. I hope he never forgets and that it haunts him till the day he dies.
Well, as for Chris's mental state, according to Dr. Todd Grande, a YouTuber, in his opinion, Chris seems to be a narcissist and have anger issues, and he displayed characteristics of psychopathy. He had no empathy after the murders. He searched up vacation getaway deals, a metal song, and texted his mistress, told the realtor he wanted to sell the house, and called the kids' schools and told them that they weren't coming back to school again. He even admitted to giggling behind closed doors after lying to investigators he had nothing to do with the murders. He lied to Shanann for so long, exhibiting signs of pathological lying. With narcissism, there are two types, grandiose and vulnerable. He seemed to display signs of both in various cases.
Again, none of this is to say that he did all this because he was mentally unwell. He is solely and purely responsible for his actions. We all have questions of why. Why would anybody do this to their own wife and children? Why not just leave them rather than kill them? We'll never really know for sure what went through his deranged mind. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. Stay safe, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
I'm Kay.
And I'm V.
And this was Rotten Minds.